Picture this moment. You're surrounded. 9 of your 17 comrades lie dead in the mud. German machine guns are tearing your patrol to pieces. Your sergeants are all gone. Someone needs to take command, but you're just a corporal, a poor farm boy from the mountains of Tennessee who didn't even want to be in this war. What do? If you're Alvin York, you do something that sounds absolutely insane. You stand up. You walk toward those machine guns, alone, and using nothing but your hunting rifle and your faith in God, you take on an entire German battalion. By the time the smoke clears, you've killed at least 25 enemy soldiers, silenced 35 machine guns, and captured 132 prisoners, all by yourself. This isn't Hollywood fiction. This is the true story of Sergeant Alvin York, the man General John J. Pershing called the greatest civilian soldier of World War I, a man who tried to avoid war for religious reasons, but became one of the most decorated heroes in American military history. Stay with me, because Alvin York's journey from pacifist to war hero will show you that sometimes the people who question war the most become its greatest warriors. Chapter 1. Born in the Mountains. December 13th, 1887. A log cabin in Pall Mall, Tennessee, a remote community nestled in the rugged mountains near the Tennessee-Kentucky border. This is where Alvin Cullum York came into the world. His parents, William and Mary York, were subsistence farmers. That's a polite way of saying they were desperately poor. They grew just enough food to survive, and barely that. William also worked as a blacksmith during the off-seasons, trying desperately to make ends meet for this massive family. Alvin was the third of 11 children, 11 mouths to feed on a farm that could barely feed one family. There was no money for luxuries, no money for comforts. Sometimes there was barely money for food. School was out of the question. The York children were needed at home. They had to plant crops, harvest crops, hunt for food, fish in the streams, and work as laborers. Every child had to contribute, or the family would starve. Alvin attended school sporadically, maybe completing 3 years total. He learned to read and write, but just barely. His real education came from the mountains. By the time Alvin was 10 years old, he was an expert hunter. He had to be. His family depended on the meat he brought home. With just his rifle, Alvin would disappear into the Tennessee mountains for hours, tracking deer, turkey, squirrels, anything that could be eaten. He became one of the finest marksmen in all of Tennessee. Not for sport, not for fun, but for survival. Every shot had to count. Every bullet mattered, because ammunition cost money the Yorks didn't have. This skill, born from poverty and necessity, would one day save hundreds of lives and change the course of a battle. Chapter 2. The Wild Years. As Alvin grew into a young man, he went wild. His father died in 1911, leaving the family in even more poverty. Alvin, now in his early 20s, took his father's death hard. He started drinking, heavy drinking. He'd go to bars and get into fights. He'd gamble. He'd curse. He lived hard and rough, the way many young mountain men did in those days. His mother, Mary, was heartbroken. She was a devout Christian, a woman of deep faith. She prayed for her son constantly, begging God to change Alvin's heart. Then, around 1915, something happened. Alvin York had a religious conversion. The details aren't entirely clear, but what is clear is that Alvin York completely changed. He gave up drinking, he gave up fighting, he gave up gambling and cursing. He started attending the Wolf River Methodist Church, a small congregation in his community. Alvin became a fundamentalist Christian. He read his Bible constantly. He attended church every Sunday. He taught Sunday school. He became a deacon of his church at just 21 years old. And most importantly, Alvin York became a pacifist. He believed in the biblical commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." He believed that Christians should not participate in war, should not take human life under any circumstances. This wasn't a casual belief. This was the core of who Alvin York was. His faith defined him. It was more important than anything else in his life. So when war came to America in 1917, Alvin York faced an impossible choice. Chapter 3. The Draft That Changed Everything. April 6th, 1917. The United States declared war on Germany and entered World War I. President Woodrow Wilson promised to make the world safe for democracy. Young men across America cheered and rushed to enlist. But not Alvin York. When Alvin received his draft notice in 1917, he was conflicted. On one hand, he loved his country. He was patriotic. He wanted America to win. But on the other hand, his religious convictions told him that killing was wrong, that Christians should not participate in war, that he could not serve and remain faithful to God. Alvin applied for conscientious objection status, requesting to be exempted from military service on religious grounds. His application was denied. The draft board didn't recognize his Church of Christ in Christian Union as an official denomination that qualified for conscientious objection status. They told Alvin he had to serve, no exceptions. In November 1917, at age 29, Alvin York reported to Camp Gordon, Georgia, for basic training. Chapter 4. The Crisis of Faith. At Camp Gordon, Alvin York became a model soldier. He followed orders. He worked hard. He didn't complain. And his marksmanship was extraordinary. On the rifle range, Alvin outshot everyone. His Tennessee mountain hunting skills transferred perfectly to military marksmanship. But inside, he was torn apart. He kept requesting conscientious objection status. He kept explaining his religious beliefs to anyone who would listen. He believed that war was wrong, that killing was wrong, that he could not serve and remain faithful to God. His company commander, Captain Edward Danforth, and his battalion commander, Major George Buxton, could have simply ignored him. They could have forced him to shut up and obey orders. Instead, they did something remarkable. They talked with him. They debated with him. They engaged with his faith.
Captain Danforth and Major Buxton were both Christian men. They sat with Alvin for hours, opening the Bible, discussing Scripture. They showed him passages where God commanded the Israelites to go to war. They discussed the concept of a just war, a war fought to stop evil and protect the innocent. The debates went on for days. Alvin wrestled with his conscience, with his faith, with his duty. Finally, his commanders gave him a 10-day leave. They told him to go home, to pray, to think, to decide what he truly believed. Alvin went home to Tennessee. He climbed to the top of a mountain, sat down, and prayed for 2 days straight. He read his Bible. He asked God for guidance. And on that mountaintop, Alvin York came to a conclusion. He decided that this war was different. This wasn't a war of conquest or greed. This was a war to stop tyranny, to stop the German Empire from dominating Europe, to protect innocent people from oppression. Alvin decided that God wanted him to fight, that sometimes, in a fallen world, good men must take up arms to stop evil. He returned to Camp Gordon. He told his commanders he was ready to be a soldier. In May 1918, Alvin York shipped out to France. Chapter 5. Proving himself in battle. Alvin was assigned to Company G, 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Division. The 82nd was a newly formed division, made up entirely of draftees and conscripts. They were green, untested. Nobody knew how they would perform in combat. They arrived in France in May 1918 and began training behind the lines. The trenches of World War I were horrific. Poison gas, artillery bombardment, machine gun fire, barbed wire, mud, disease, death everywhere. In September 1918, Alvin's division participated in the Saint-Mihiel offensive, a massive American-led attack to break through German lines. This was the 82nd Division's first major battle, and they performed well. Alvin York fought with distinction, but he didn't do anything that particularly stood out. Not yet. After the Saint-Mihiel offensive, the 82nd Division was moved to the Meuse-Argonne sector of the Western Front. This was where the Allies were launching the largest offensive in American military history. Over 1.2 million American soldiers were involved in this campaign. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was designed to break through the Hindenburg Line, the Germans' most fortified defensive position, and force Germany to surrender. It was going to be hell. Chapter 6. October 8th, 1918. The day that made a legend. October 8th, 1918. A cold, misty morning in the Argonne forest of northeastern France. Corporal Alvin York's battalion was tasked with capturing a heavily defended railroad. The Germans knew the Americans were coming. They had fortified every hilltop, every ridge, every forest position with machine gun nests. Alvin's platoon, consisting of 17 men, was sent on a patrol behind German lines. Their mission? Locate and neutralize the German machine guns that were slaughtering American troops as they advanced. The patrol moved through the forest quietly, carefully. They managed to capture a handful of German soldiers without firing a shot. Things seemed to be going well. Then everything went wrong. German machine guns opened fire from the hills above them. The guns were perfectly positioned, with overlapping fields of fire. The Americans were caught in a kill zone. 9 men fell in the first 30 seconds, killed or wounded. Blood splattered the forest floor. Screams filled the air. All 3 of the platoon's sergeants were dead or dying. Someone needed to take command. That someone was Corporal Alvin York. Chapter 8. One man against an army. Alvin assessed the situation quickly. He was down to 7 able-bodied men. They were pinned down. If they stayed where they were, the German machine guns would eventually kill them all. Alvin made a decision. He ordered the other 7 men to guard the German prisoners they'd already captured. Then he would handle the machine guns, alone. This sounds insane, suicidal. But Alvin York wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like a hunter. In the mountains of Tennessee, Alvin hunted turkeys. And turkeys are smart. If you shoot one turkey and the others hear the shot, they'll scatter. But if you shoot the last turkey in line first, the others don't notice. You can work your way forward, taking them one by one. Alvin applied that same principle now. He crawled through the underbrush, using the terrain for cover, working his way toward the machine gun positions. He could see the gunners, but they couldn't see him. Not yet. Then Alvin York began to shoot. 1 shot, 1 kill. 1 shot, 1 kill. 1 shot, 1 kill. Each bullet found its mark. German soldiers fell. But the others didn't know where the shots were coming from. They couldn't locate him. He was a ghost, moving through the forest, dealing death with terrifying precision. The German machine gunners kept firing at the pinned-down Americans. They had no idea that death was stalking them from the side. Chapter 8. The German Counterattack. Then the Germans spotted him. A squad of German soldiers, about 6 men, charged Alvin's position with fixed bayonets. They were going to kill him up close. Alvin switched to his pistol. He started shooting from the back of the line forward, just like hunting turkeys. The last man fell, then the next, then the next. All 6 Germans died before they reached him. Alvin went back to his rifle and continued working his way toward the main machine gun nest. By now he had killed more than 20 German soldiers. His ammunition was running low. His rifle barrel was hot, but he kept advancing. Finally, he reached the main German machine gun nest. It was a fortified position with multiple guns, dozens of soldiers, and a German commander named First Lieutenant Paul Vollmer. Alvin York alone called for their surrender. Vollmer looked around. He saw dozens of his men dead. He saw this lone American soldier, calm and deadly, standing in the open with his rifle pointed at the machine gun nest. Vollmer made a calculation. If he kept fighting, more of his men would die. This American couldn't possibly miss. Lieutenant Vollmer surrendered. He ordered his men to lay down their weapons. And that's when things got really interesting. Chapter 9. The March Back. Alvin York had just captured a German position. But now he had a new problem. How to get all these prisoners back to American lines without getting shot by his own side or by other Germans. He put Lieutenant Vollmer at the front of the column with a pistol pressed to his back. Alvin figured that if they encountered any more Germans, Vollmer could order them to surrender too. And that's exactly what happened. As Alvin marched his prisoners back through the German lines, they encountered more enemy soldiers. Lieutenant Vollmer, with Alvin's pistol pressed against his spine, ordered each group to surrender. And they did. By the time Alvin York reached American lines, he had 132 prisoners. 4 German officers and 128 enlisted men, all captured by 1 American corporal and 7 other soldiers who had stayed back guarding the first group of prisoners. When Alvin turned over the prisoners to his superiors, they couldn't believe it. They thought it was a mistake, that Alvin had miscounted. But no, 132 prisoners, all captured by a patrol that had started with 17 men and been reduced to 8. And the body count was even more staggering. When American troops advanced through the area where Alvin had fought, they found at least 25 dead German soldiers, all killed by precise rifle fire, all the work of 1 man. Chapter 10. From Corporal to Sergeant to Legend. Alvin York was immediately promoted to sergeant. His commanders recognized that what he had done was extraordinary, unprecedented. A formal investigation was launched to verify the details. Multiple officers interviewed Alvin and the other survivors of the patrol. They examined the battlefield. They interviewed German prisoners. All the evidence confirmed Alvin's story. Sergeant York's actions had broken the German defensive line in his sector. His capture of those machine gun positions allowed American forces to advance. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of American lives were saved because Alvin York had neutralized those guns. On April 18, 1919, Alvin York was awarded the Medal of Honor, America's highest military decoration. He also received the Distinguished Service Cross and decorations from France, Italy, and Montenegro. In total, he earned nearly 50 medals and citations. General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, called Alvin York the greatest civilian soldier of World War I. But Alvin's fame didn't come immediately. For months, his heroism was barely noticed by the American press. Then, in April 1919, the Saturday Evening Post published an article titled, "The Second Elder Gives Battle." It told Alvin York's story to millions of Americans. Overnight, Alvin became a national hero. When he returned to the United States, he was met with parades, ceremonies, and endless offers. Movie studios wanted to make films about him. Companies wanted him to endorse products. Politicians wanted him to run for office. Everyone wanted a piece of Sergeant York. But Alvin York said no to all of it. Chapter 11. The Hero Who Refused to Profit. Alvin York believed it was wrong to profit from an act of war. He had done his duty. He had served his country. But he didn't want to become a celebrity or make money from the men who had died beside him. He turned down tens of thousands of dollars in offers, movie deals, book deals, endorsement contracts. He refused them all. Instead, Alvin went home to Tennessee. He married a woman named Gracie Williams, a young woman he had courted before the war. They settled down in Pall Mall, and Alvin went back to being a farmer and a blacksmith. But Alvin's community wouldn't let him live in poverty. The Nashville Rotary Club organized a fundraising campaign. They raised money to buy Alvin a farm and build him a proper house. The people of Tennessee took care of their hero. And Alvin had a dream, a mission, something more important than fame or money. He wanted to educate the children of his community. Chapter 12. The York Agricultural Institute. Alvin had grown up without education. He had seen how poverty and lack of schooling trapped people in a cycle of hardship. He didn't want that for the next generation. In the 1920s, Alvin founded the York Agricultural Institute, a school for underprivileged rural children in Tennessee. He used his fame to raise money for the school. He dedicated years of his life to making sure poor mountain children got an education. Alvin also founded the Alvin C. York Bible School. Education and faith, these were the two things that mattered most to him. For years, Alvin lived quietly. He raised his children, 7 sons and 1 daughter. He worked his farm, he attended church every Sunday, he taught Sunday school. He lived the simple, humble life he had always wanted. But in 1941, as World War II loomed on, Hollywood came calling again. And this time, Alvin said yes.
Chapter 13. Sergeant York, the movie. By 1941, the world was at war again. Nazi Germany had conquered most of Europe. Japan was rampaging through Asia. America wasn't in the war yet, but it was clear that war was coming. Warner Brothers Studio wanted to make a movie about Alvin York. They argued that his story could inspire Americans, could show them that one person could make a difference, could help prepare the nation for the coming conflict. This time, Alvin agreed. But he had conditions. The movie had to be accurate. It had to show his faith. It had to portray his struggle with his conscience. And all of his profits from the movie would go to fund the York Agricultural Institute. Warner Brothers agreed to his terms. Sergeant York was released in 1941, starring Gary Cooper as Alvin. It was a massive hit, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of the year. Gary Cooper won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Alvin York. The movie showed millions of Americans what one brave man could do. It showed that faith and courage could coexist. It inspired a generation of young men who would soon be called upon to serve in World War II. President Franklin D. Roosevelt loved the film. He quoted Alvin York frequently, saying that in World War I, Americans had won a lease on liberty, not a deed to it. Roosevelt used York's words to build support for entering World War II. When America finally entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, Alvin, now 54 years old, tried to re-enlist. The Army turned him down due to his age and declining health. Instead, they sent him around the country to support war bond drives and rally public support. Chapter 14. The Final Years. After World War II, Alvin York's health began to fail. He suffered a stroke in 1954 that left him partially paralyzed. He had other health problems, likely the result of his time in the trenches during World War I. Money became a problem. Alvin had never cared about wealth, but now he owed back taxes to the IRS. He had spent so much money on his schools, on helping his community, that he had neglected his own financial affairs. When news of his financial troubles became public, Americans rallied to help him. A fund was established. Donations poured in. Speaker of the House Sam Rayburn personally intervened to help settle Alvin's tax debt. The hero who had asked for nothing, who had given everything, was taken care of by a grateful nation. September 2, 1964. Alvin Cullum York died in Nashville, Tennessee. He was 76 years old. He was buried with full military honors at the Wolf River Cemetery in Pall Mall, Tennessee, not far from the log cabin where he was born. General Matthew Ridgway delivered the eulogy, saying, "Sergeant York was a humble man of great faith." And that's exactly what he was. Chapter 15. The Legacy of Alvin York. Today, Sergeant Alvin York remains one of the most decorated soldiers in American history. His childhood home in Pall Mall has been preserved as a state historic park. Visitors can see the log cabin, the grist mill, the church, and the cemetery.
The York Agricultural Institute eventually evolved and merged with other schools, but Alvin's commitment to education lives on. Scholarships are awarded in his name. Schools teach his story. In 2000, the United States Postal Service issued a stamp honoring Alvin York. The Army's ROTC program has the Sergeant York Award for Outstanding Cadets. A traveling football trophy between Tennessee universities is named in his honor. But more than the monuments and memorials, Alvin York's legacy is about something deeper. His story teaches us that heroism often comes from unexpected places. Alvin wasn't a career soldier. He wasn't a military strategist. He was a poor farm boy with a third-grade education who happened to be an excellent shot. His story teaches us that faith and duty can coexist. Alvin struggled with his conscience, wrestled with his beliefs, and ultimately found a way to honor both his faith and his country. His story teaches us about humility. Alvin York became one of the most famous men in America, but he never let fame corrupt him. He remained humble. He went home. He served his community. He lived his faith. And perhaps most importantly, Alvin's story teaches us that one person can make a difference. One man with a rifle facing impossible odds can change the course of a battle. One man with a vision can educate a generation. One man with faith can inspire millions. Closing. Let me take you back to that forest in France, October 8, 1918. 9 of your comrades are dead. Machine guns are tearing your patrol apart. You're surrounded, outgunned, outnumbered. What do? If you're Alvin York, you stand up. You trust in God. You use the skills you learned hunting in the Tennessee mountains, and you do what needs to be done. 25 Germans killed, 35 machine guns captured, 132 prisoners taken. All by one man in a single morning. When asked how he did it, Alvin York gave a simple answer. A higher power than man guided and watched over me and told me what to do. That was his secret. Faith. Not just faith in God, but faith in himself, faith in his training, faith that if he did his duty, things would work out. Sergeant Alvin York didn't want to be a hero. He didn't want fame. He didn't want glory. He just wanted to do what was right, to serve his country, to protect his brothers, to live his faith. And in doing so, he became a legend. Remember his name. Alvin Cullum York, December 13, 1887 to September 2, 1964. The reluctant warrior, the greatest civilian soldier of World War I, American hero, American legend. And remember his lesson, that one person, armed with faith and courage, can face impossible odds and emerge victorious. If Alvin York can do that, what can you do?